absolutely wild as Verne Gagne's all-star wrestling goes coast to coast and continent to continent. The greatest wrestlers in the world.
He may be an apprentice carpenter, but I guarantee you he is a seasoned ring veteran.
I've been hit with bar stools, bar rags, barmaids.
I'm talking to you.
They're scared that Hulkamania's still running wild. Oh, yeah. I got a big fat wife and 9 kids at home, and I gotta feed them.
And take a look at Jesse the Body in real life.
Open your hand once, if you would.
You want to see it?
This is absolutely unbelievable. Totally, completely out of control.
He's coming in over the top. Hey! Look out!
I think I've got this thing figured out, you guys. Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Stubbs. I'm host of the preeminent AWA podcast, AWA Unleashed. You know that. You're getting a really good, hard, tight shot of my face. But I think I figured this out, guys. I'm super excited. After 117 or 18-ish episodes, the open, guys, I got it figured out. Are you ready for this? I'm Mr. Off the Top Rope. Joe, you are Mr. Step over the top rope. And Mick, you are Mr. Stop, Drop, and Roll under the bottom rope. Do I have it right?
Yeah, you do. And I'm really jealous because I wanted that second rope. You know, that middle rope is so important in pro wrestling, and I just haven't attained that yet.
But Chris, you've only gotten 3 of us nicknames. You're avoiding or missing the most important host or co-host of this podcast. And she happens to be in Mick's curtains at the moment.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, there's Mackenzie poking out behind the curtain to see when it's her cue.
Yeah, you know, I always get the ass end. It never fails. But what the hell? It's
this
the
podcast
wrestling.
Is representative of life, right?
There it is right there.
We've all got animals. We've all gotten the backside from animals.
Oh, my God. There we go. All right. Well, moving on.
All right. Well, speaking of that, we are the backside of podcasts. So welcome into this, you guys. And it wouldn't be the backside of a podcast if it wasn't the second week of Mick Karch, where this is a month all about Mick. God, I love that. That was a fantastic hit show. That was fantastic. This is Mick Karch. And this is basically questions for Mick, talking about your career. And we're going to kind of throw in a little anecdote here and there. Is that kind of how we got it?
Yeah, we got it. I'm distracted by the cat because you notice she's encroaching more and more on the screen. And that's great. That picture of Nick kissing me on the cheek, that's going to hit the deck any minute now, I'm sure.
I was just going to say, I think we need to do an over-under on the time before that goes plants off the top rope onto the floor.
Yeah, the cat will be going over and under too any minute now. So we're all good.
Oh man. Let's get the obligatory plugs out of the way, the begs out of the way, however you want to call it. Hey, we just had a great interview that Mick and I did with Herb Simmons. And if you're not familiar, Google Herb Simmons and Gerbil.
Oh boy.
Gerbil. That's what happens when I've got work stuff open. I looked at something for work tonight, and then it's like, Google Herb.
That's all right. I'm going to try to feed the cat here, too, while you're straightening out your gurgle. Come here.
She's like, I want a gerbil outside.
There we go.
So,
Unreal.
But no, it was a great interview with Herb Simmons, just talking about St. Louis wrestling, the stranglehold of the NWA, working with the AWA. Feel like there's so many. If you're talking about history, and as much as we love Minneapolis,
Karch or what?
We're all good. Let's keep gurgling.
I'm gonna keep gurgling. Okay. But no, check it out. Become a member of our pinfall level, you guys, for $5 a month. You get a magnet, a sticker, a letter from me. You get the exclusive watch-alongs. You get the monthly Q&As, the live stream. You get exclusive interviews like the one we did with Herb Simmons.
Oh.
And just there are a lot of really good things. Plus, you get, what is it, 5x7 pictures, Mick, from you, a 5-pack of 5x7s?
4x6. 5-pack of 4x6. Yep.
Okay.
And Herb was great. I mean, I can't begin to thank Herb Simmons enough.
He was great. He was really good. Yeah.
Yep. So
yeah,
good deal.
He did good.
A little swig of that, a little gurgle. And,
I know. I had a gurgle. I don't even know what that word means. That's probably not even a real word. It's just you look it up in urban
now because it's gonna
you look it up in Urban Dictionary and it's going to say
gurgle
definition. What the fuck?
Oh man, did we lost them? Crowd's gone.
Yeah, well, that's come back to us. Also, as well, guys, join us at T Public. We've got all of our AWA Unleashed merchandise over there. T-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies. Probably don't want those in the summer, but we've got phone cases. We've got coffee mugs. We got a great selection over at tpublic.com. All right, Mick, before we get to the fun stuff, I know we gotta get a little serious here for a minute. And unfortunately, it's something that it's just we haven't had to do it in a while, thankfully, but it rears its ugly head.
Here we go again. And as you said, Chris, we had a little respite there, but Bob Bruggers, who was a standout basketball player actually at Danube High School in Minnesota, then turned pro for a few seasons, a couple of different teams, and then turned professional wrestler under the guidance of Verne Gagne. Verne and Billy Robinson trained Bob Bruggers. He wrestled here in the AWA for a short time, basically did a lot of work out in the southeastern United States, and he was one of those that was on the plane that actually crashed with Ric Flair on board and suffered a serious injury and got out wrestling many, many years ago. But Bob Bruggers, 80 years old, and yet another one. Very, very sorry to hear this. So another Verne trainee, and hats off to Bob for the memories and condolences to family and friends.
All right. Go ahead, Joe.
It's just, it's going to happen to all of us. It's sad and difficult to see yet another one go. But I remember thinking when my dad passed away, rather than mourn the death, celebrate the life.
Yes.
Doesn't make it any easier, but remember the good. Keep those memories, whether it's Bob or another wrestler or somebody within your family. Celebrate the life, and hopefully that will help take care of that pain, some of it anyway.
There you go.
Yep. All right, guys, let's get into Mick Karch. Again, these are all, for the most part, listener submitted questions, Mick, to you. People wanting to know certain stories that you asked them, and we are going to get to as many of those. If we don't get to yours, we'll try and get to it next week. If we don't get to it next week, there are 4 weeks in May, 4 weeks in Mick Karch. So we're going to try and line that all up. The first one, I guess I want to ask you, and who sent this in? From Chuck Hokinson, and I think it's a good one. Kenny J or George Gaddi?
Wow. Well, I'm a Kenny J mark. And George and Kenny J were two of the nicest guys you would ever want to meet. I got to say that. Kenny J, of course, legendary, not only in but out of the ring. And there's a shot. I had a chance to interview Kenny at one of his histiocytosis events. Love the guy, just as good as gold. Scrap Iron George Gaddi, hardest working man in wrestling. A lot of times he would referee or wrestle, set up the ring, tear down the ring, and then drive 500 miles to the next town and do it all over again the next night. Kenny J by a hair. If I had to choose in terms of overall impact, I go with the sod buyer over the scrap iron, but two legends in the AWA, no doubt.
Quick side note question. So did Kenny J work in landscaping, and is that where he got the whole sod buster? And was
Correct.
George, did he work in like a scrap iron yard?
I don't think George, I don't know, but I would guess that George was probably more because he was kind of the Iron Man of wrestling, would do it all and, that type of thing. But I don't know, his son is out there, George Costi Jr. someplace. Maybe we'll ask him. But God, two terrific guys, legends in the AWA.
Yeah, but Kenny did indeed do landscaping, and the whole sodbuster thing sort of came from that.
Yeah, he and his brother owned a landscaping business, so that was totally legit.
Very cool. Our next question, Mick, is from Doug Farmer. He asks, who decided on the guests for SNR? Did the studio book the wrestlers? And then there's another part to it. I'll get back after you answer that part.
They did not. The studio left it all up to me. And especially when it came to the local talent. But no, the studio was kind of hands off, which was really, a good thing. They just gave me the ball and ran with it. And I would go in and tell them, who we got as a guest today or next week and so forth. So, yeah, it was 100%, my ball game as far as the creative end of it, up to and including the guests.
So being in production with All Star Wrestling, the whole idea, if possible, is to present it that it's a live show. And I think SNR gave that impression as well. But we both know that it was pre-taped. So going with that, it was a 1 hour show, right?
Yes. Well, the SNR itself was anywhere from 2.5 to 4 hours, in duration with the back-to-back syndicated television shows. The local segments that we inserted into the show was 30 minutes worth, spaced out over that, whatever time frame that was.
And we both know when you're recording something, there can be retakes and so forth. How long was a typical taping session for you for that half hour?
We did pretty well. Except for maybe a couple of wrestlers that couldn't, put a sentence together, or ringsiders of the week that, kind of did a Jackie Gleason once the camera was turned on. I would say on average, and we taped on a Thursday, and I had already seen the syndicated shows, scanned through them. So if there was anything to talk about, I did. Otherwise, our segments, we would go in, we'd tape at 5:30 on a Thursday night, and I was usually out of there by 6:30. And again, the image or the illusion that we created was that it was live in studio. Jesse Ventura certainly thought it was. He saw me at an event on a Saturday night, and he said, "Who's hosting for you tonight? You're not there in the studio." Jesse, the wonder of television. But yeah, it was typically about an hour, in and out on a good night. So good stuff.
So you said that the segments, like some of the segments, were put within the other show's wrestling blocks?
Yes.
Oh, so did you get?
Yeah.
So when you're recording it, did you get that week's shows prior to them airing so that you could refer to something within the show?
I got the shows prior to airing, but I did not know what I did know is, like, during World Class, which I think opened up for us a lot of times. I knew that World Class, a segment like Fan Feedback, was going to be somewhere in the middle of World Class. I didn't know where, but otherwise I knew that the other segments were going to be at the end of shows. So, it was World Class was the only one I never really knew. So I couldn't refer to anything specific that had just happened. What I would do is I would say, hey, this week you're going to see such and such on World Class Wrestling at the beginning of the show, the return of Fritz von Erich or whatever it was. But that was as far as I would allude to something that was actually happening in the show.
Gotcha.
So how much influence, just to kind of piggyback off of what Joe was saying, and maybe this is kind of a silly question. Did you have any influence or any, like, did you have a hand in any post-production information or suggestions?
Not typically. We had a pretty good crew. Todd Ziegler, Tom Freeman, those guys did yeoman's work. No, I mean, and the guys were so cooperative. I would come in and I would say, hey, we got a last minute change here. And like a lot of times you do with Chris, you'll all of a sudden you'll change the crawl at the bottom of the screen, or I'll say, we're going to switch up this or that. And you do it without blinking an eye. And that's the way these guys did it too. They were pros. Post-production, no. Once the camera turned off, I was gone. Okay.
I just wasn't sure, because sometimes talent likes to have a say in kind of how it's presented on the backside. So I was just kind of curious if
I trusted them. I trusted the guys.
Okay. The next one here from Derek Stark. He wants to know, besides the AWA, what other promotions brought you in and treated you well and were professional?
Wow. The AWA brought me in and treated me professionally. Yeah, I guess they did. I worked for so many promotions over the years.
I didn't want to read it verbatim, but I didn't want it to lose its luster.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. Boy, oh boy. I would say off the top of my head, there were probably 3 promotions where I was brought in that I was treated very well. One was our good friend, the late Paul Alperstein. God, Paul was a money mark in the AWF, poor guy. But he brought myself in, of course, with Terry Taylor and Lord Alfred Hayes. Terry negotiated and renegotiated several salary increases between he and I and Mr. Alperstein. Rob Russin, and Joe, you are very familiar with Rob, both good and bad. Rob had a promotion called the IWA, International Wrestling Association, out of Florida. Brought me in several times to do some stuff on the Sunshine Network and brought me in for some conventions. Rob was a great guy for me to deal with, even when he was in the AWA itself. Rob was another guy. Here's my criteria, I would say. And by the way, I want to mention one other guy, the remnant of what was once Dave Ciupik, Heavy D
from Heavy D to Skinny D.
Isn't that something? Good for him. Heavy on wrestling promotion, Heavy D, Dave Ciupik. The reason I bring these guys in is because when they said they were going to pay me something, or this is what you're going to do, this is it, these are the parameters, this is the money you're going to get, boom, they delivered. And, they listened to my ideas and treated me respectfully. And that was what it was all about. So I would say, just off the top of my head, as far as independent promotions on a local level, that's a whole different animal. So your degree of what is professional, what is being treated right, is just something completely different. But off the top of my head, those 3 guys were great.
Yeah, I mean, it's all subjective, because people kind of interpret things differently.
Yeah. But again, hats off to all 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we both know there's certain promoters that you just sort of want to stay away from.
No,
we won't get into names.
No.
Next question is from Stuart Markham.
Can you tell me in a private chat, because I really want to know?
that I would do. Next question's from Stuart Markham down in Jerry the King country, and of course Jerry the King Lawler country. He states or asks, Mick, you often joke about your AWA payoffs, but I have a serious question. Did they pay you at your announcing debut, or was this considered a training session? And then going forward, were you really shortchanged on pay from the AWA?
Okay. First things first. No, I did not. The first one was not a training session. The ESPN debut, they actually cut me a check, and there was no smell of burning rubber. They didn't bounce it over to me. So yeah, I was paid right from the get-go, from the ad. Look at that right there. Now, you've got two interesting signatures on there. The check, by the way, was made out to me by Pat Markson in the AWA office, and it was signed by Greg Gagne. So my question, of course, at that point, did Verne even know I was working with him? I think he did.
So that's not Greg's handwriting.
No, that is the top one is
he's got really good cursive.
Yeah. But Greg signed the check.
Man, that's impressive.
I don't know how many checks Verne actually signed, and it was for a whopping $100 bill that night, August of 1987. As far as being shortchanged by the AWA, we kid about it all the time and about the money that I got to pay back for. No, they never shortchanged me. This is the salary increased after a little bit. And of course, they paid for that rented tuxedo from Skeffington's. So, all out, it probably cost the AWA, maybe about $5 bills, to bring me in for a typical taping, including airfare, hotel, and the midnight snack. But no, they never once shortchanged me on a check. No.
Yeah, I think kind of the perception of things, towards the end as things got real nickel and dimey. So naturally, we're going to play in and lean into the bit. But like you're saying, seriously, it was professional and it was done right.
Absolutely.
Kind of what you're saying. At the end of the day, as much as we like to joke about it, I mean, you guys were on the inside. I obviously wasn't. But yeah, we're just leaning into the bit and having some fun.
Chris, we could either laugh about it or cry about it. So we choose to laugh about it here a little bit.
Yeah.
They were great. AWA is great.
Exactly. Well, I want to talk about something that did make you cry. The incident in Vegas from Zeke Curry outside of your little dust up with the boss in Vegas. How was your relationship and how did you get along with Verne?
I think I mentioned on last week's show, I didn't have a lot of interaction with Verne. Most of the conversations Verne and I had, believe it or not, were at the airport before we flew out to do the tapings in Vegas. And there's the champ in later years. He had long since retired, and he's got the little wrinkle lines going there, but he was still in great shape. Look at the shoulders on that man. I got along well with Verne. And again, we joke about the incident in Vegas, which of course was, kind of nasty, but, we've rehashed that many, many times. On the overall, Verne treated me very well. And I think the proof is in the pudding. 1 year at Cauliflower Alley Club. So this would have been the early 2000s. I actually went up to Verne and, look who's here, something along those lines. And I said, Verne, I just wanted to really thank you. And he's kind of looking at me. He's waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I said, you put me on the map, Verne, and I appreciate it. And he's looking at me, and I swear, he started getting a little teary-eyed because I don't think Verne was used to people thanking him at that point, quite honestly. And he said, well, you were so loyal to us over the years, you really deserved it, and thank you. So yeah, we had an okay relationship. It was kind of more jocular than anything else, but not a lot of contact. But Verne, again, outside of that one time in Vegas, he was fine. He was okay to deal with.
I got to add to that, Mick. You had stated it was the early 2000s when you were both at Cauliflower Alley Club. I certainly noticed a kinder, gentler Verne. I really do believe he knew what was forthcoming for him with his memory issues, getting up there in age. He really did soften up. From if I go back 15 years prior, that Verne Gagne from the mid to late 80s was I don't want to say a hard ass or a badass. He was a businessman who did what he needed to do for the AWA. But when we brought back the AWA in those series of pay-per-views, he was a different Verne. He had mellowed considerably. So I just wanted to add that because, what you were saying, Verne, I think, was starting to appreciate and understand those that were a part of his magnificent legacy.
Oh, you know what? And Joe, he's 15 years removed from the bullshit at that point.
Yeah.
The stress of dealing with Vince McMahon and whoever else. And yeah, he's in his twilight years. And I think you're absolutely right. He knew what was on the horizon a little bit. And Joe, I know you'll back me up on this. No matter what people say about the AWA and especially about Verne Gagne, I'm sick to death of it. We joke about the relationship with Verne because, again, we're trying to look on the lighter side of things. But Verne Gagne is a legitimate legend in this business. And whatever mistakes or miscues he made with the AWA towards the end does not tarnish the first 30 or 28, 29 years of the company. And I will forever be in Verne's debt. Period. That's true.
The term legend gets thrown around way too often and way too loosely. Without question, legend and Verne Gagne are synonymous.
No doubt.
So to segue from that, you are a broadcaster with the AWA for a short period of time. Alex Goldstein wants to know if there was a broadcaster that you would have wanted to work with, but you didn't get a chance to. And then she's got another question, but I'll let you answer this part of it first.
Yeah. And one of them I mentioned on our Patreon interview with Herb Simmons. And that would have been Larry Matisic in St. Louis. And there's Larry. Larry, the last couple of years of his life, he really struggled physically. And this is a shot from, I would guess, middle, 2015, 14 maybe, in St. Louis. Larry was getting around in a wheelchair at the time. Larry was legendary in St. Louis, and again, so underrated on his accomplishments and achievements in wrestling. I would have loved to have worked alongside Larry Matisic. The other is a little more well-known on a worldwide stage, and that would be Mr. Jim Ross, a good old JR. And I've talked about this many times. A lot of people are big Gordon Solie fans, and Gordon in his own right was great. Joey Styles would have been fun. Lance Russell would have been fun. But Jim Ross, to me, and not only the WWF or WWE Jim Ross, but you go back and listen to some of those tapes in Mid-South Wrestling in the mid-1980s when he was working for Bill Watts, the excitement and the enthusiasm that Jim Ross brought to the announce table. This is, again, a bucket list thing. Obviously, I'll never get the chance to work with Jim, but God, I would have loved it. Absolutely.
So the other part of Alex's question was, what do you think of Michael Cole?
Michael Cole, for a while, I was not a Michael Cole fan, and I don't know why. I guess a lot of people weren't necessarily a Michael Cole fan. Maybe it was the old corporate stuff, and we knew that, Michael Cole was not talking off the cuff. He was saying things that were told to him to say into his earpiece. But as I look at this guy, you talk about Iron Men and stalwarts and guys that are loyal to the business. And I think it's been, common knowledge the last couple of years. It's been mentioned that Michael Cole has missed two events or two tapings in 26 years with WWE, WWF. It's amazing. And I think he's been rejuvenated now with Corey Graves at ringside and with Pat McAfee at ringside and the Triple H era coming into play. I'm a Michael Cole guy now. I think he's really done yeoman's work.
2 tapings in 26 years.
I believe that's what he said, that he only missed those 2.
That is absolutely insane, and he deserves kudos upon kudos for that. Just think about that. How many people only miss 2 days of work in 26 years?
Exactly.
This guy, I mean, and this is a weekly grind. This is not driving, an 8 to 5 and then driving 15, 20 minutes, half hour to work. You're traveling the world to do what he does. Damn, I did not know that about, but Michael Cole, holy shit.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you're always on stage too, whether or not you're in an airport or behind a camera or whatever, you're always on stage. So great job, Michael Cole. I'm a fan.
I think one thing about wrestling broadcasters, and maybe I'm not belittling what people do nowadays, but I feel like now it's more about being a pitchman and selling the services and selling everything else other than like the wrestling, I feel, and the in-ring product is almost second compared to everything else that they're trying to expose their fan base to.
Great point. The business has changed so drastically in that sense. And the other thing I would say to you, Chris, and I alluded to it, and Joe knows this very well, the modern day wrestling announcer, especially on a big stage, he's got that constant yep in his earpiece. And he's got his notes in front of him. Be sure to say this, be sure to say that. When I was doing it, and even at independent shows, it's not like that. There's not a producer, doing hummingbird, in your ear all day. It was spontaneous. You called the action. You didn't worry about the other shit that you had to get in.
Yeah.
Promote the next pay-per-view, whatever else. The closest I come to that today is at an independent show. They might say, hey, don't forget to mention the next date we're coming back here, to the casino. So it's a whole different animal. So, and there's a lot of pressure. I mean, it's less arduous to be off the cuff than it is to listen to some guy in your ear for 3 hours telling you what to say.
Well, as he's talking, you need to continue talking. It's not like, hey, hold on a sec. What do I gotta?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's not easy to do, and if you think it is, give it a try sometime. The one comment about that, the difference of the 1970s and really the 1980s for the AWA. We certainly in the 80s we had the ability to talk to the announcers in a headset, but it's nothing like today. But with the AWA, especially in the 70s, there wasn't a pay-per-view to pitch. There wasn't merchandise to pitch.
It was the product, the in-ring product itself.
And it was a squash match. The whole idea was to put over the name talent to make them look bigger than life. And then they'd go over into the interview area, and that's where the selling would happen. But even then, there was no earpiece. You had a floor director saying 1 minute, 30, counting down 10. That was the extent of it. So it's a lot more intense. Well, let's face it. I mean, the WWE is a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate.
Because of the money, that's why there's the pressure.
Exactly. And so they've got so many different people handling so many different specific aspects of the business. With the AWA, you had Verne, Greg, maybe a Wally, but they weren't in your ear. They were talking to you before time, and then in Mick's case afterwards, geez, why did you do that?
I'm sorry, I had a flashback there. It's all right. I'm all right. I'm okay now. Whew.
Let's go to the next one from Earl Fitzsimmons. It's a great history lesson from you guys every week. Not just the numbers, but you tell the stories, and that's what wrestling is all about.
Yes.
A question for you, Mick. You mentioned that you interviewed Bruiser Brody after a match, Bulldog Bob Brown. Why isn't so? Why did Brody deserve such a fate?
Well, I guess it happens. You deal with people. We denigrate Bob Brown on the basis of his match with Giant Baba at Wrestle Rock, which should be denigrated. Bob Brown, and that's actually a picture of the program from up in Winnipeg, the West 4 Wrestling Alliance, when Bob Brown and Bruiser Brody wrestled in front of 700 people, as I said, in a 15,000 seat arena. In the main event. Bob Brown was actually a grizzled veteran in this business, and in Kansas City especially. He and Bob Geigel ran the territory. Bob was in main events all the time. He was an old school, hard-nosed heel. There was nothing, and I'm being really generous here, there was nothing flashy about Bulldog Bob Brown. A lot of people, you watch his matches today and you would think, my God, I would watch grass grow. That would be more exciting than this. But Bob Brown was a tough guy. He was not built like the wrestler, like the power lifters. And Brody obviously respected him enough to take their feud from Kansas City up into Winnipeg. And all they did was brawl. So, yeah, Bulldog Bob Brown and Bruiser Brody, that actually was a main event. It wasn't too bad. Probably went about 7 or 8 minutes of fighting inside and outside the ring. But don't go by what you saw at Wrestle Rock with Baba and Bob Brown. It's not indicative of the man's career.
No, I mean, for both Baba and Bob Brown, it was later in their careers. And like any one of us, you can have an off day. In the case of that Wrestle Rock match, they both had an off day, unfortunately. Mick, next question is from Pamela Powell. Who was most instrumental in getting you started in your broadcasting career? Was it Wally Carbo?
No. The broadcasting career part of it, Eddie Sharkey was the guy. Wally got me involved with publicity in the AWA. I mentioned before, the very first job I had was walking some publicity from the AWA office at the Dyckman Hotel down to the Star Tribune. And I would come back and Wally would reach into his pocket, pull out a handful of change, and that was my payday. Wally, I mean, in later years, Wally wanted me to get involved in the broadcasting. But the first guy that actually put me on TV, and it was on local cable with his Pro Wrestling America promotion, was Eddie Sharkey. And oh my God, he's there he is again.
There's that caterpillar
back again. Yep. It's my God. I look at that and I think, who the fuck is that guy?
The glasses, the hair, the caterpillar. I mean, it's something.
And look at that death grip I got on the microphone. This was actually
got that down.
And well, years of experience, but we won't go there. But 1988, this shot was an SNR shot. 1989, but yeah, Eddie Sharkey and his PWA promotion, taping the matches at various gyms and nightclubs around the Twin Cities area. Eddie is the guy, so you can either thank him or blame him for getting me started actually behind, in front of the camera.
Okay, so Pam has a second part to her question unrelated to the broadcasting aspect of it. But as I read the question, I might have a couple of questions myself. So Pamela states, also, I remember those great AWA after parties at the Dyckman Hotel. You were really a lot of fun. Care to expand on that, Mick?
Whoa, okay. I'm so glad we didn't vet these questions before they came through.
The picture you put up, Chris, is perfect because that was Mick Karch's wrestling announcer / porn look. And now we go into this question. So I'm like, okay, let's get the goods here, Mick.
That was a porn look, huh? This, by the way,
why do you think he had the mustache?
That was a look.
As I was saying, this shot here of the Chateau de Paris at the Hotel Dyckman in Minneapolis had nothing to do with where the after parties were. The restaurant itself was in the Dyckman, but the wrestlers never went in there. The after parties were either in the bar or they were up on the 6th floor if somebody had access to the AWA wrestling office. Things were, as far as I was a lot of fun. I don't remember. I do remember Pam Powell. I will say that, Pam. I remember you, dear. But it was just boys.
Karch After Dark.
Don't worry.
We might have to have Pam on one of these.
Yeah.
No, under no.
I bet your porn name was Harry Caterpillar, wasn't it?
Boy, this just absolutely just tanked all of a sudden.
Sorry.
You know, I got to screen these questions ahead of time. But yes, it was boys being boys. And what I would say is it's from a different era again. You know, the boys were, maybe the next night they had to get up and, maybe fly a plane, maybe drive to the next town. There wasn't the supervision. There wasn't the microscope that the guys were under all the time. And once again, hotel. Can you imagine a bunch of wrestlers in that environment? Come on.
I couldn't imagine that the owners of the Dykeman would be, unless they just go in there and everybody's sipping tea with the fingers, the pinkies out, and I can't see that happening.
Yeah, you can see Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch doing that. Away from that picture, the wrestler weren't in there because the chairs were upright. So, Pam, thanks for the memories, Pam, Paul. Appreciate it.
Here's a question from Norm Pascal. Either from personal experience or from what you've heard, can you name a couple of guys from the AWA days that weren't exactly pleasant to be around?
Sure. And I would go back to the 1970s, which is kind of when, I got my feet wet in and around the AWA. And it's the same two names that you hear often enough. One of them was Billy Robinson, and we talked about Billy many, many times. As I go online or read other wrestlers or other fans' stories about Billy Robinson, it wasn't exclusive to the AWA. Billy just had kind of an inborn heel personality. I know there's a lot of people that would swear by Billy Robinson from a technical in-ring standpoint, and that he was a master. He also had a tendency to be kind of a bully, and his wrestling in-ring personality, where he would take people to task, kind of carried to the outside of the ring too, in interaction with fans and other wrestlers. I've told the story how at training camp he brutalized Paul Pershman, Buddy Rose, the first year that Paul went out for training camp. And I guess that's a way to train him in, break him in. It's like boot camp, I guess, in that sense. But Billy Robinson, I think, had a well-deserved reputation as a guy who had a chip on his shoulder. The other guy I've mentioned a couple of times too, and again, legendary tough guy, Lars Anderson, Larry Hyneeme. And I've heard this again from people who were in and around the business in the 70s, that especially if you were a young guy breaking into the business, you weren't always treated with kid gloves by Lars Anderson, Larry Hyneeme. Whether or not that was a good thing or not, I don't know. I do know that outside the ring, he also had a chip on his shoulder. Started to mellow a little bit later on in his career when he was wrestling, and also owned a T-shirt shop in downtown Minneapolis, the Shirt Shack. But he had that reputation, and he was a tough guy, and he knew it. An ex-collegiate wrestler. And at training camp, he occasionally would be the same kind of a bully, if you want to say that, as Billy Robinson. But those are the two guys that come to mind. Robinson and Hyneeme, definitely. You hear the stories over and over again.
Our next question comes from Denny J. Johnson. He says, love the show, guys. Thank you for keeping the AWA alive. It is something I look forward to every week. My question for Mick is, you said on last week's show, or it might have been a recent one, that Nick Bockwinkel, Wally Carbo, and Eddie Sharkey, said that earlier, all played a role in opening doors for you. Over the years, who among the wrestlers has publicly said the most positive things about you?
Two guys come to mind, and one I have mentioned many, many times on this show, and that's Larry Hennig. And what's interesting about my relationship with Larry in the 1970s, even into the early 80s, and this, I believe, was a shot again at one of Kenny J's events. Larry, I think, kind of saw me as a lot of the wrestlers did, as, markish, kind of a hang-around, which I was. I tried to mind my P's and Q's, but I was everywhere. I mean, I just, if a flight was coming in from Honolulu, I was at the airport, or I was outside the locker room, or whatever. Over the years, I interacted with Larry a lot. And it got to be such a mutual respect thing. When he would walk into a room and spot me, he immediately came over with a greeting. How are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. He actually introduced me to Dan Gable, one of the greatest amateur wrestlers, if not the greatest of all time, in Waterloo. And Larry said to Dan Gable, and this is Larry's quote, not mine. He said, "Dan, I want you to meet this guy. He should have been the most famous wrestling announcer in the world, because I've never heard anyone any better." And I was just like blown fucking away. I mean, literally I was. And I, thank Larry profusely. The other thing that I would say is when the rock and roll guy, the boombox guy, was having his meltdown at the Kenny J event a few years later, and took myself and Ed Hellier to task in a bizarre incident, it was Larry Hennig who was just off screen, and Larry was ready to beat the shit out of this guy for ruining the moment at a fundraiser for the Kenny J Histiocytosis Foundation. And Larry told me, he said, if he would have said one more word, I would have knocked him on his ass. So in that sense, Larry going to bat for me, I'll never be able to, give enough accolades to Larry Hennig. The other guy is certainly no stranger to you, Mr. Ciupik, and that would be Barry Darsow. I believe he's Crusher Khrushchev in this particular photograph. Barry, the guy that you denigrated, said he was a cheap knockoff of the Road Warriors. Couldn't hold a candle to Animal and Hawk, and so on and so forth. Chris and I didn't agree with that at all.
No, but, never.
Never. Barry Darsow was another guy. I didn't interact with Barry until later on in my career, but he's another guy. I saw him in Atlanta, and I forget who the wrestler was, but I'm walking up and Barry says, "Hey, this is Mick Karch from Minnesota. He's my favorite wrestling announcer." So Barry, again, a great friend, great sense of humor, love the guy, but to get put over by the guys that you respect and admire, I think it's the greatest compliment I could get.
All right, let's get to another one here from Daryl Oliver from the home of Bronco Nagurski, International Falls.
Wow.
Way up north, I think Mick may be able to shed some light on this. He's a longtime fan. Remember a time during the 1970s when the AWA TV show was bounced around different time slots. You had to check a paper every week, it seemed, to see when it was on. Any insight as to what happened? And you guys are the best. Thank you for that, Daryl. But why the different time slot?
This is interesting. This is middle 1970s again. And the AWA was drawing some pretty consistent houses in Minneapolis and St. Paul, anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000. The AWA on television, on Channel 11 in the Twin Cities, the AWA had been owned by Chris Kraft Broadcasting. And Chris Kraft was, I guess, a corporate fan of pro wrestling. They sold to Metro Media. Metro Media, on the other hand, was not a fan of professional wrestling. And as the story goes, I wasn't there personally, but I heard from somebody, a pretty reliable source. Verne was going to have a meeting with the higher-ups at Metro Media to negotiate the renewed AWA contract on WTCN TV or what have you. And Verne decided to forego the meeting because they had been butting heads a little bit. And Verne decided to play tennis the day of the meeting. Again, hearsay, I wasn't there, but pretty reliable source. Metro Media did not take kindly to Verne not being there for the meeting. And as a result, over the next several months, the AWA time slot if they weren't preempted, instead of being on at 6 o'clock, they were on at 11 o'clock at night, or they were on at this time or that time. And they bounced around. You literally had to check the newspaper to see when AWA All-Star Wrestling was going to be on TV. And boy, did attendance take a hit. So if you don't think that consistency in being on the same time, the same, channel, the same everything every week makes a difference, it sure as hell did. So your crowds, which were 5,000 to 10,000, all of a sudden are 2,500, 3,000 maybe. So, did Verne's ego get in the way? I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it wasn't long after that, though, when the whole landscape in the Twin Cities media market sort of changed, because then the AWA shortly thereafter ended up going to Channel 9, KMSP. I can't remember the exact year, but I want to say, was that, maybe I was even in the early 80s?
Yeah, I was going to say early 80s. Yeah, they were at Lake Calhoun, and then of course they went over to Cary, Levin, and Golden Valley. So yeah, they bounced around, but yeah, the landscape definitely changed after that.
Well, and consistency, and you guys know this. You got to have consistency. If you're going to have a product, you need to make it easy for the consumer to access the product, because if you're going to have a fan base that is going to be, they've got expectations each and every week, not unlike the podcast, and it's not even close to being like a wrestling promotion, but things have to be there when they expect it to be, because then you're going to lose. If people have to search for your product, then that's a problem.
You are totally right, Chris. And this is not a shot at wrestling fans, but it's kind of an indirect shot, because wrestling fans, rather than look in the newspaper to see, hey, you know what, wrestling is not on this time. Wait a minute, let me check. Oh, here it is. It'll be on at 11 o'clock this coming Saturday. They didn't do that. It was all of a sudden they turn on the TV. Oh, shit, wrestling's not on this week. We got this on instead. And never bothered to look and see.
Yeah, they're not going to look for it.
Exactly. So attendance did take a hit. And, not the greatest days for the AWA.
Next question. I think this will be our last question. Is that right?
Yeah. This will be. Let's wrap up on this one.
Okay. This is from Kelsey Carr. My dad swears that Bobby Heenan called Verne Gagne's daughter a horse during an interview. Did that actually happen? And if so, how did he get away with it? Well, before you even answer, it's Bobby Heenan. So, no holds barred, all bets off. But go ahead and take it, Mick.
First of all, I love the way you delivered that question. And when I hear the question out loud, it really is funny. Did Bobby Heenan call Verne Gagne's daughter a horse? Well, kind of. This was a situation. Bobby was doing a promo, and you never knew what Bobby was going to say. Joe, you know this better than anybody. And they didn't put any kind of a leash or muzzle on Bobby Heenan. And Donna Gagne, who I believe raised horses and champion horses, as a matter of fact.
She rode them.
She had done a promo, I believe, an interview in studio where she held up a picture of herself with one of her champion horses. And lo and behold, poor Donna, the guy that followed her in the interview area just happened to be Bobby Heenan. And of course, Bobby's, I believe his quote was, "What do we have to waste valuable time on this show when I could be out here talking, looking at that picture of those two nags out here?" You couldn't tell. Oh, poor Donna. You couldn't tell. This is Bobby's quote. "You can't tell Verne's daughter from the horse." And so, yes, as a matter of fact, Bobby Heenan did say that. I don't think if anybody else said it, they would have gotten away with it. I can't see Laurent Soucy getting away with it, or, Dennis Stamp or somebody like that. But yeah, so in that sense, Bobby couldn't tell the difference between Donna Gagne and her horse.
Only Bobby. I mean, what else do you have to say?
Hey. Oh, boy.
That would have been
M.
a perfect place to end the show, but unfortunately, we got more plugs and more promotion. We're going to have more. We've got some more carryover questions for Mick Karch. So if you've got more, send them to Mick. I'm sure he's got some. If you want them, we got a couple more weeks where Mick's going to be talking kind of exclusively about his memories. And if you got questions for him, hit him up. Let's go ahead and take care of a little bit of business here, guys. First of all, let's talk about TeePublic, which is where we've got all of our merchandise now. We've got T-shirts, we have got mugs, we've got all sorts of goodies, phone cases, stickers, magnets, pictures, whatever you want. TeePublic.com Unleashed Plus. And then also, we just did an interview with Herb Simmons, who's a fantastic promoter based out of the St. Louis area. We talked about Kiel Auditorium, Wrestling at the Chase, SICW, everything that he's got a ton of memories, especially about a guy like Bruiser Brody, Dick the Bruiser, just a whole bunch of really good things. That's on our Patreon as well. So check it out. If you want access to the Patreon, which is our watch-alongs, which is our live chats, you get the podcast a day early. Just go $4.99 a month, $5. And you guys, the more that you sign up, the more people we have sign up, the more content that we can push out there. We want to do more, but if we can get you as part of our Patreon, that will really allow us to give you more things and present more opportunities. So there we go. I think I did all of that. We want shout outs here, guys.
Well, I've got one. I would like to shout out one of our Patreon members, Sandy Smith. Sandy is so loyal to the podcast, from top to bottom, and the AWA and old school. Sandy, you are the greatest, and we really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
My shout out goes to, I got to refer back to a question earlier in the show. My shout out's going to Pamela Powell. I really, really, really want to know how Mick Karch was so fun during those after parties.
No, you don't.
Come on, Mick.
Maybe.
I think we may have accidentally drug poor Pamela into something that it was not supposed to be.
She asked the question.
But in her she kind of, I don't know her. I'm sure she's very nice, but she kind of opened herself up.
And I'm not saying that it had anything to do with Pamela. She just may have been the witness to Mr. Karch,
It had everything to do with Pamela.
Oh.
Hey, I'm kind of like a mushroom. I'm a fun guy, It's Shitsky.
Jesse Mays, thank you. I don't know how I can follow up the poor Pamela Powell. Oh my God. I don't even know her, but she's going to write something very, I don't know. She's apparently great. She's a friend of yours, Mick, and that's all we need to know, right?
Dear friend.
How dear?
Apparently from many, many years ago.
Many.